All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this August webinar series. You are in the right place if you're looking for your webinar on divorce in Maryland. We're talking no fault ground separation under one roof and what infidelity really means. So, I wanted to welcome everyone. I'll give you a few minutes. Get settled, get your notepad, relax. You get some information today. Hopefully, you'll learn something or get clarification on anything you may have thought you knew. Okay. So, welcome everyone again. I want to start with introducing myself. My name is Attorney Cherise Williams, and a little bit about me. I'm the principal attorney and owner of the law office of Cherise L. Williams. I'm licensed in Maryland, D.C., and I specialize in family law. I'm a practitioner who does what a process called collaborative divorce. So it's a specialized divorce process. So if you want to learn more, please give our office a call. It is a great way to get divorced, a conflict resolution process. And you can also use collaborative for those who want to get married, entering into your union with a prenuptial agreement, or even if you are married and you think you need a postnuptial agreement, you can never be too ready. So, and looking at all the I do custody, child support, you name it, under those that umbrella, I'm there. So that is a little bit about me. And before we begin, I just wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer about and housekeeping notes on what we're doing here today. So, of course, we're here for a webinar, but I always tell people that this webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not legal advice. I am not your attorney, and it doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. So, with that being said, if you do have very specific questions about your legal situation, then please give our office a call. We have our contact information here. We'll also have it on the very last screen. And we can then set up a consultation with you. And if you want to become one of our clients and we're a good fit, then that'll be wonderful news. I love to give information and education to help people, but if you really need advice, please do it the proper way and actually hire an attorney to give you that advice. This will be a recorded session, and I'll give the presentation, and throughout it you have the chat. You can utilize that chat to communicate amongst yourselves. There may be stuff that you can relate to, so don't think that any question is a dumb question. Somebody else probably has that same question that you have, and so having that ability to communicate allows me to see it and I can answer questions about it. Otherwise, the questions that you have may also be answered if you already submitted them. So on the last screen, again, you'll see how and where this will be posted in the future. So with all that being said, now we can get to the substance of why we're here. So tonight, the reason why I want to do this webinar is because divorce law has changed in Maryland, but it's been a few years. And so I do get questions, or people still understanding what they believe was the old law that Maryland had. So I kind of wanted to give a little tips and information and education on the changes that came in 2023. So in Maryland, Maryland decided to follow suit with a lot of the other neighboring jurisdictions and pretty much a lot of the country. And Maryland decided to remove their fault-based grounds for divorce. This was a major shift, and the goal was for Marylanders to have the ability to reduce conflict in the courtroom and to give people a faster result that would, generally speaking, have less conflict. And the thinking behind that is, if you don't have to go into court and prove fault grounds, that you would not have to then lay out all the things your spouse did wrong. And sometimes marriages have gone on 30 plus years. So again, it just becomes an endless days of trial about who did what back in 19, 50, so 60, 70. So this method allows us to cut through all of that red tape. So that is the idea behind having a faster process. So then the question that are raised when there's no fault grounds is there going to be separation but the ability to live in the same home? And what does the meaning of no fault actually, what does no fault mean? And also, what impact, if any, does cheating have now that we have this no fault grounds? So we're going to talk about that a little more. Next, we're going to look at the new grounds and what they actually are. So, one part of the new changes to the law is your separation period. Previously in Maryland, we had a 1 year separation period, and now they've reduced it to 6 months, which is also in line with how DC also had already changed their law for a 6 month separation. So we are similar to that jurisdiction. So you can live separate and apart for 6 months. And what does the code, if you want to be specific and go look up the code for all of this, is Maryland Code Section 7103A. So when you look at 6 month separation, we're looking at um, separation, even if you're in the same home. And that 6 month period starts from the date that you guys identify as your separation period. And you don't have to have a written agreement when you look at the 6 month separation period. And you don't, but you have to show that you have had a separation. So, what that could look like, and we'll get more into this, is separate finances, sleeping arrangements, your routines, things of that nature. Also, under that code section is irreconcilable differences. So, with irreconcilable differences, this is a big one because a lot of people fall under this one. Is only one person, one spouse, has to state that they want this marriage to end in a complaint that is citing irreconcilable differences. You don't need the other spouse to even know or want to be divorced. So previously there were different grounds for divorce. And so when you had fault grounds, and so with irreconcilable differences, it allows people to get out of a divorce as long as they are truly showing the intent and interest that they want to be out of that marriage. So that really does cut through a lot of red tape and allows for people to divorce without having to name 1,000 different reasons for why. So that is the other ground that is utilized under the law. And another one, which is the fastest way to get divorced if both parties are on the same page, is a mutual consent divorce. So this is the uncontested divorce. 6 month separation and irreconcilable differences, those could be contested divorces, generally speaking. But mutual consent, that is the grounds where both parties are agreeing to divorce. And so with this one, you do specifically need to have a marriage separation agreement. So you need to have the agreement on how you're going to separate money in the marriage. You need to have an agreement on how you're going to separate property. Of course, your money can be your property. So, because there's real property, there's intangible property, intangible property. So that is something that needs to be agreed upon, as well as if you have children together, you have to understand that you need to agree on custody and child support. So all of those things make up the things that people would go to court for the court to have to decide on in a divorce. So if all of those things are decided, they're reduced to writing in what's considered either a marital separation agreement or a marriage separation agreement. MSA. People call it a couple different things, but if you see those acronym MSA, then it's what is represents what I'm speaking of. So that is what will get you under the mutual consent aspect of the statute. So those are three of the grounds that are, generally speaking, the ones that are under the statute that have come to be what is utilized post 2023 in the divorce world. Okay, so now we're going to get a little more detailed about what some of these mean. Let's look at what separate lives means, but still living under the same home, because this is a big change in Maryland. In the past, if you were separated, that means you had to move, one person had to move out of the home. And so by moving out of the home, it costs money. So this was what the cost reduction and this and the ability to move faster now that we have this new law. So with separate lives, we need separate bedrooms. If you have that ability. Not everyone has separate bedrooms for each spouse to have their own, especially if you have kids. But separate rooms could mean moving into an attic, moving into a basement, sleeping on the couch, making arrangements so that you are now having another separate sleeping area so the intimacy in your marriage is no longer there. You can't have separate lives if you're still intimate sexually with your partner. So just be clear that the boundaries are set and that's no longer a part of your marriage. You're eating separately, potentially, you're spending money, you're contributing to bills similar to like if you had a roommate living with you. So you can set up a bank account that is just yours. But again, there's all rules and there's case by case scenarios. You don't want to have a bank account where you take all the money and leave your spouse without any money because that could be considered another problem. But if you have a job and you have a joint account where you're paying those joint bills, you don't want to disrupt the bills that you are paying for together, especially if you're still under the same roof. So that's important. But you're also going to be holding yourself out as separated. So no social appearances together. So it may be impossible not to go anywhere together, but you do need to start making it known that you are separating. And so that's where that part of the people are understanding that you're going to be living separate lives. So that's an important aspect of living separately because this could be a witness that you utilize in your case if there's ever a disagreement at trial about whether you're living separate lives. So you can keep a journal, you can have your separate bills, you may set up something of yours that's a bill that you're now paying for you to start introducing your new life. Now, if you live separate lives and you're moving out, that makes this whole conversation much easier. I'm not saying people have to live together because trust me, not everyone needs to, and it's not safe to for all couples separating. But for those who have to, this is what part of the change in the law allows people to still afford to be together until they truly separate their assets in the divorce. So that's the big distinction. All right. So after I've explained that a little bit, now I'm going to move on to talking about infidelity after no fault. Does it still matter? This is still a big question that I get because a lot of marriages end due to infidelity. Finances, number one reason, infidelity is still high up on the list. So, what this means is that you can't file fault grounds for alimony, for infidelity. But what does it mean in regards to other aspects of division of equitable assets? When it comes to infidelity, sometimes that evidence can be utilized for matters such as alimony, property division, and custody. Let's break down what it could mean for alimony. When it comes to alimony, if your spouse has utilized money in a way that has harmed the family, has taken from the family, or they're just not contributing to the household, then sometime if they're if the alimony award is granted just based on the other qualifications for alimony, the court sometimes does penalize that parent and make them pay alimony to the other parent. It's not a guaranteed thing, but it's still one factor that can be added to that argument for why your client, if I'm representing that client, why they should be awarded alimony. When it comes to your property division, similar, the court has to make an equitable distribution of assets. If they feel like one spouse has benefited from their affair in a way, and not just from a physical standpoint, this is all related to finances, or the other party has suffered, it could be emotional or it could be some other way, then there may be more of the equitable distribution awarded to one side. And then when it comes to custody, and excuse me, I have getting over a nasal congestion that I've had. So just forgive me for that, but I'm feeling much better, so that's the important thing, and why I'm able to talk to you today. So cheers to me for being able to actually talk. Custody, let's talk about that. It's very hard for alimony to really, for not alimony, but for infidelity to really be problematic when it comes to custody because the parent still has their constitutional right to care for their children. And even if you don't like that they cheated and they might even leave you for that partner and live with that partner, that does not automatically negate their parental rights. So it has to there has to be some showing that either the new paramour or the conduct of the parent harms the child emotionally, physically, in some other way. And even if the child learns of the affair and they're upset, that may be, if they are in such a state where they can't go over there or something, sometimes that can interfere initially from, reunification efforts or visitation efforts, but it's not grounds for them not to have custody or the child not to go over there fully. So you should always be trying to work on the relationship the parent has with that other child, unless they're a danger to that child. So again, if they demonstrate some deviant behavior or something that is directly harmful, they live a lifestyle now where they're into drugs or they're doing something with this affair partner that they can't actually implement their parenting skills, then you might have an argument that it can be argued why this affair and the continual relationship this person has with the affair partner will impact custody. So that's something to think about, but it's not that it has no value anymore. It's just utilized in a different way. So, okay. So let's talk about the idea of what else comes with these new laws. We're talking about some of the pros and pitfalls of this new law. So looking at this, we also want to look at how this faster process. So you no longer have the year waiting period. So again, that saves you a half a year of time. That's huge for a lot of people. And that's helpful when it comes to moving on into the next phase of your life. You have a lower cost. So as it's being cheaper if it doesn't take as long, if you don't have to go to trial to prove all of the aspects of domestic violence, infidelity, all of those things where you have to call multiple witnesses, you may have to get police involved, experts, then you're potentially going to spend less money in the process overall. So that's helpful to a lot of people. Let's look at the privacy. You don't have to air out all of your wrongdoing like you would have in the previous contested divorce method. So less conflict if you wanted to have less conflict. People will still find ways to have conflict, but in court, if you don't have to show as many facts, then the idea is that you'll overall have less conflict. And if you can stay in the same home again, you may be able to do that until it's time to either sell your property or you can afford to move out. So those are some of the pros. Some of the cons: it could be harder to prove separation if you do live in the same home. If your spouse doesn't really want the divorce and they want to sabotage you, it's possible that you'll have a hard time showing that separation. Sometimes people don't want to leave, and so you may have to, do wait and all the way until the divorce is is finalized. And sometimes you don't sell the house right away, and people rely on that money to move. So that could be seen as a con for some people. Then with the no fault grounds. For some people, infidelity and abuse and all these things are so important that they tell their story. And people have a hard time getting out, feeling like the other spouse is not sharing how deviant or how hard or how dangerous they are. And custody cases sometimes are overlooked where a parent could be viewed as dangerous. So this doesn't always show the true side of how people were in a marriage. And so results can oftentimes, I won't say often, I'll use a different word. The results may come out not in the favorable to what a parent thinks is in the best interest of their child. So when we talk about um, agreements, you're going to need to look at how it's crucial, if you wanted to have the no consent, the mutual consent divorce, that you're able to put everything in writing. And if you want to stay out of court, you can use other methods to get divorced that don't involve the court. So until it's time for the divorce, the uncontested divorce hearing. So, but if you can't come up with an agreement, then you're going to have to utilize the divorce method. So there's no limited divorce anymore. So there's no there's you just usually when you're filing because it's time to actually divorce. So that is something that you will do with this method. So our question we have next is, what do we do next? So the first thing you need to do when you're looking at your intent or your thought process, if you're looking to get divorced or you're having these thoughts in your marriage is something that you don't think you can save, is determine which ground for divorce applies to you. Are you looking to separate for 6 months because that's what's best for your scenario because you know you're not going to have consent from your spouse, and you want to utilize that because you just been living separate anyway? um that could be grounds for divorce. Plus you can have more than one ground. You can have irreconcilable differences or 6 months if you've already lived a 6 month separation under those rules that I've articulated. You also want to get finances and yourself organized because once you step into the divorce arena, you're going to have to be transparent and potentially turn over your documents and your information. And some people are much better than that than others, and that's okay. So emails, text messages, depending on whether you have Apple or Android, either of those are methods to, I mean, are devices that you can learn how to access your text messages, because that's important that you have the information in your text message that is usable for a lawyer in the court. So you want to know, identify who the call went to, the time, date stamp. You want to have the sequence of the conversation in the right order. You don't want to break up those communications or try to look like it's been altered. So there's ways that you should learn how to download that properly. It saves everyone a lot of time and it'll save you money, as well as your emails. Similar. Don't delete stuff. That's not appropriate. That's not a part of the process. And it can be figured out if you do delete stuff. Your metadata is possibly discoverable. Let's look at Facebook, all your social media. Everything when it comes to divorce is potentially up to be viewed. Even if you think, oh, it's uncontested, it's no fault grounds, does not mean that that evidence doesn't become subject to inspection. So you do have to keep that in mind. And so also talk to that attorney early so you know how to preserve evidence and your information and how many years back you need to go, because some marriages are 30 years. You may not have all of your documents for 30 years. So figure out how what documents you can access and can get records from, because banks, they have their limitations as well as to how far back you can go. Let's look at the options for divorce. I mentioned collaborative divorce in the past. That's a conflict resolution process. And so if that's something you think you and your spouse both who will have to have collaborative lawyers. So let's start there. But it is still a much better way to divorce and process. So consider your options for divorce and be informed. Don't just automatically jump into court and you think, I'm going to go after my spouse and this is the only method that's available. We need to broaden our horizons. You can Google and figure out the best ways to divorce you for your family, and especially if you have kids, because it's important if you're gonna co-parent, then that you're not tearing the family apart, even if you're not going to be husband and wife and wife and husband. We respect all relationships at this firm. So whatever your relationship is, just make sure that you're utilizing the best process that you can to separate. And so, yes, those are the things that you should do next. So I hope today that you've learned something when it comes to looking at some of the methods that you can utilize to get divorced, right? Um, but let's see, are there any questions that we can answer for anyone? I think there were a few questions that I didn't notice, or at least one or two. So I think one person again wanted to ask the questions about how to prove that you've been living separately under the same roof. And so we talked about the separate bedrooms, going to events separately, setting up like bank accounts, or if you want to get your phone out of the family plan, things like that. Um, you can utilize those methods. If you're Zelling your partner or Cash Apping, If you have a joint account, that may not make sense if you're already, if you're not, then you can start sending your half of the bills, especially if you weren't previously. You can start doing that to show you're now living responsible for your portion of the bills that are still joint. All right. So someone asked about living separately for years and whether or not, if we've been separated for years but never finalized divorce, does that new law help me? So yes, if you've been separated for years, you well surpassed that 6 month timeline. And if, as long as you guys did not engage in any recent intimacies, then yes, you 100% can file and have 6 month separation or irreconcilable differences, because guess what? You no longer have been living as husband and wife, and now you actually want a divorce. So you don't need your spouse's permission for that. So I will say, with irreconcilable differences, it does allow for more flexibility because you, living in the same roof sometimes can get hard to, if you're if you there are questions about having a separate bedroom and all of those things. With irreconcilable differences, that method is still good because you don't need the other person's consent. So, um, and sometimes you can make a mistake, fall back into your partner's arms or something like that. So, as long as with irreconcilable differences, your intent is still to divorce, that could be the best strategy and approach so that you still have your good grounds for divorce. So I'll just say that for now. There's a lot more to these topics, and each case is a case by case basis. But overall, I wanted to thank everyone for joining me on this webinar. I love giving people information and education on some of these important topics. And when I see consistent questions come up, it just gives me ideas of subjects to talk about. So I just touched on this on the surface. There's so much more with this topic, but at least I've given a little bit of insight into how the 2023 changes to Maryland law are impactful. So please, if you've enjoyed this, watch it again. If you missed something, my YouTube, my social media channels are here, my handles. 50 Shades of Law. The only one that you would use an underscore is for Instagram, but I have Facebook and YouTube, and there's other videos if this is your first time joining us. I want to thank you for joining us for the first time. Please come back again. We're going to start up with the monthly. I did take a break for the summer because, summertime, sometimes we all need a break. But I'm back and you'll see me again. And make sure that you like and you comment if you have any questions, or if you need us directly, feel free to contact us. And thanks again. And, if you want to become a member of the Williams Law Firm family, you're more than welcome, because here you are more than just a case number. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your evening or day, depending on where you are in the world. Bye bye.